Welcome back to Guided Souls. I am your host, Katie, and I'm so excited to be back here for another week with you guys. This week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with my new friend Ryan. You may know him as at Endangerhood on TikTok or Instagram. His username is Cracks in the Kingdom on TikTok as well, so you may recognize him from that. It's interesting, the reason I brought Ryan on is because I just love the way that he approaches spirituality with such lightheartedness and joy and this feeling of play, which is something that I feel like is underrepresented in the spiritual community and what I'm personally trying to call into my life. And we definitely talk about that, but we also get into some heavy, deep topics. And I've been really called to the juxtaposition of the light and the darkness that we experience throughout our lifetimes. And I think that this conversation is a very beautiful example of how that can play out and how we can just kind of live and enjoy our way through it when we can and feel the pain when we're there, but also know that we're here for a short amount of time and to, try and live our lives to the fullest. And I do want to put a trigger warning on this. We talk about suicide in this episode, so if that's not something that you are in a place to hear, maybe skip this episode. But if you are, I do think that it's a really beautiful conversation about an otherwise taboo and heavy topic. So yeah, hope you enjoy. Ryan, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thanks for asking me.
Yeah, I've been so excited to talk with you and selfishly, I want to talk to you because your videos bring me a lot of joy. They bring other people a lot of joy. And finding joy within spirituality, I think, is an underrated skill or like necessary thing for us to have. I can feel myself getting like really bogged down. So I was just very drawn to your lightheartedness in the way that you approach these like kind of heavy concepts,
Oh, hey, yeah, well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
As I was going along, I was just thinking with TikTok was like a break for me from Instagram. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna play on TikTok. Like, I was new to it. I'm like, whatever, this is just a sandbox. And that whole idea of like, I'm gonna take away my expectations, right? And I'm just going to co-create with the universe, like listen to what people are saying. And then people actually were writing, they're like, oh, you should do like a Saturday Night Live version of spirituality, or, they're like, that's something. And then so I was really open to that energy of like, hey, because I did something really kind of focused on Instagram. And then here I was just open to play. And so that's just what came out, and I started doing a thing too where I'm like, I'm not going to write my bits, right? I'm just going to, and one of the big ones that broke for me was that I was in Malta and it was my day off. And I'm like, I just woke up and I did one of these things where you're like, I'm going to make something special today. When I was like, I'm doing all these things where I'm going to say it. I'm going to manifest this. I was like, I'm going to walk into town because I happen to be in Malta for my job. I work behind the scenes on like travel shows and stuff. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to find a little place on a cliff that's just for me. And I don't know how I got that idea, but then I found it. I did. And I did this video there. And the idea was no script. I'm just going to play music. And I'm going to hope, like, I don't know if you read that Rick Rubin book of like the creative act. It's really awesome. I was reading that book at this moment. And the idea is to receive the cosmic transmission that you're being sent it, and like he tells a story of like Michael Jackson and Prince, how they would get sent a song and they'd be like, oh, I got to do this because if I don't do it, this cosmic transmission is going to move on to Prince. Just this idea that you get these divine messages. And so I was like, oh, I've been working on that in my life. I'm like, well, let me try to focus on that as opposed to what comes from my imagination. So if I'm in the moment and if I am dancing, because I even saw like psychics, I've been doing all this stuff, right? On this, and she's like, you're gonna find your connection through the beat of the music, right? So I was just dancing on this cliff in Malta for a while, and then I just hit record and I said the lottery won, and I had another script idea. I actually had kind of been writing a script on my way there, of course, because we can't stop our minds, my brain. And then that one, I was like, oh, let me put that aside and let me just do my original idea. And that was the lottery. And the other one, it was still okay, but it wasn't the. So I love those moments when you feel really that's my project or my experiment right now, is to feel when you feel that message or whatever, like identifying what it is, like being open to that. I don't know if you've had this experience where you'll see like a great piece of art or a song and your whole body vibrates, and it doesn't matter who you are on this planet, you felt it because that was from somewhere else. And so I really am trying to just open myself up to that and to play and to not get, you can bog yourself down into like, oh, well, this is what I do. I'm in this box. I like growing up, I wanted to be a comedian. So you kind of put yourself in this box. And then after, I basically I had like a mental breakdown after I had a kid. And then as I came back, I was like, oh, why am I putting myself in a box? How about I just say I'm a creative person and just allowing myself to open up to that. It sounds weird, for because it sounds simple, but for me it was a big, you can have these little switches in your mind that are a big release. And so yeah, and I'm just really working on playing more and collaborating, almost like when you're on stage doing stand-up. Yes, the audience isn't talking to you, but they are through how they're responding. And I'm been looking at TikTok in that way, which is, I'm like, hey, what are we doing together? Let's make this together.
Yeah.
So it's been more supportive than I thought. I was afraid of TikTok. Everybody's like, oh, you got to go on TikTok. I'm like, dude, I already did Instagram, and now another one. I'm 46. I guess start at the bottom again. And then that's all fear. That's all negative. When somebody pushed me, and then I'm glad that they did, because when you do something and people connect to it, it did give me some confidence, and it's like a reminder of like, hey, yeah, here you go. Like I love those moments when you feel like the universe is actually telling you, hey, come on this way. Yeah, you're on the path. As like I said, I'm off of work for like 4 months. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to work on my connection to spirituality. And believe it or not, a witch from Belarus from Instagram, she's like, you're going to move to the woods. And this was years ago. She's like, and you're going to work on connecting your spirituality. And at that moment, that's when you open up whatever my path is. So
Yeah.
yeah, here I am
That's
trying
so
it.
cool.
Why not? Yeah,
Yeah.
you can definitely go too far in the spirituality where you start tripping out, because when something lines up and you're like, oh, that was amazing. And then you're like, every hour you're like pulling a tarot card or like looking at angel numbers. I just wrote something about the angel numbers on Instagram. I just shared it. And it was cool because sometimes I wonder, because I didn't really hear about the angel numbers till recently. Maybe you've known about them, but I wonder because we've lost, this is my own idea that I had yesterday. I'm like, is it because we've lost so much trust in all of our institutions and all of our media that our brain is like, well, what can we trust? And even though time's an illusion, right? It's always consistent in our life. Like if it's 2:22 Eastern Standard Time, it's 2:22 Eastern Standard Time. And so our mind maybe is so comforted in that, in this chaos, in this world of manipulation that we live in, that we're giving these numbers a divine power, like a divine, we're like, because that's all we can believe in. So we're like, oh, 222, that means I'm on my path. 555, doors are opening. And you're like, wait, 6 months ago, I wasn't thinking about this. But now the world in my mind, I don't know. It's just an idea, possibly, that the clock tower is like a new church.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a really interesting perspective, and I feel like I probably within the last year became aware of angel numbers,
Yeah.
and then of
I mean,
course you
it's
start
fun
seeing them everywhere, and it is
all the time. And then you go a little crazy. Like
right.
222, stop it. Why are you chasing me? Leave me alone.
Okay, what's funny is I got the number 116, which is not like an angel number
Yeah.
really, but I got it, I like saw it everywhere for months, and I was like, what is happening?
Like, what do you
And
want from
I
me?
I still actually don't fully know. I thought like maybe on January 16th something really
Yeah.
big was going to happen, and it kind of did. That was the day I decided to just like deactivate my TikTok account for the time
Okay.
being. So I was like, "Oh, have you been giving me like my TikTok death date? Like is that what this is? I don't
Yeah.
know."
Dude,
But
I
now
mean,
I'm
I
back on
saw
and I
this.
still see it, so I don't know.
Well, I saw this guy and he said, you can assign your own message to it. It's not like there's a message, it can be
Right.
whatever it is for you.
Yeah.
And that felt good. But then also you feel just as lost. You're like, well, if I knew, I wouldn't be looking for numbers.
Right. Right.
Obviously, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Exactly. No, that's so fun. And I feel like you have really unique perspectives on things. And the lottery video is what originally like got me onto your page. And for those of you listening who don't know, Brian's video is basically about he like starts out saying, I've won the lottery, and it kind of like draws you in, and then you realize he's talking about he won the lottery because he gets to be here as a human on Earth. And I just loved that perspective so much because that is how I feel a lot of days, but not every day. But I didn't used to
Yeah.
feel that way at all, like ever. We
No.
get so sucked into the mundane and the day-to-day stressors that it's just
Oh
like
yeah.
so hard to kind of zoom out and see that.
Oh yeah.
So, have you always had that perspective? Is that something that kind of like developed throughout your lifetime?
I think I grew up like pretty happy and a love child in San Diego. I had like the best magical childhood. And this, I'll just go through it really quick. And then I had a head injury in high school from a pole vaulting accident, so brain injury. So that was like a moment of like a death rebirth where I had to kind of come back. And that was different, because I had hurt my brain. And so that was big, and that really traumatized my family more than me. That would be the main thing. Like, yes, the head injury happened to me, but when you're a parent, your kid gets hurt, it happens to you way more. So that unfortunately like destroyed my mother. She pretty much went insane for like 10 years. And when you go insane, I mean, that's a relative term, but she was so stressed that the diseases came out of her body. And so that was so hard to see all that. And then of course, then I was a hardcore drinker, right? Hardcore alcoholism. And then I got sober. And then I was on my comedy path, and pretty much I was always a positive person in general. Like I would say my outlook was, I was super confident even through all this stuff. I was like, everything's gonna work out. And then I went to UCLA and I pursued theater and then pursued, comedy and doing all the auditions like you always see, going after all the parts, which is just its own crazy experience on your mind because I mean, I could talk forever about it. You'll have these like, I'm giving up. Oh, I'm not. All that stuff. And yeah. And then I had a kid, and that's when I had like a huge mental collapse out of nowhere. I don't even know where this came from. It happened in the delivery room. So, and yes, I overcame my head injury. Yes, I became sober after alcoholism. Those were both difficult. But for some reason, this was the most difficult because there was I didn't know what happened, right? She's having the baby, and I heard this voice in my head say, um, please God, let me live to see my baby. Don't let me die. And I'm laying on the floor thinking that I'm dying, right? I don't know. And I know it's like kind of funny because you're like, oh, your dad's like passed out in the delivery room and stuff. And at the time I kind of was like, oh, this is crazy. What's happening? And then it didn't stop though. After the baby was born, this feeling that I died became crazy, right? I was going to the emergency room, all this stuff, and my mind just disappeared into this anxiety, fear state where I was like running from a bear and it never came down. And through this moment, right, these 2 years of that, I think is kind of where because this is when I'm listening to Alan Watts, I'm Eckhart Tolle. This is when I'm really like, I've lost my mind. I have a baby. I need to function, right? I have to take care of this family. And how do I when I'm freaking out inside? So from that, and then eventually working my way out of that, which anyone who's listening, if you are in that, I just want to let you know that you can rewire your brain. Like my brain went so wrapped up, so tight, trying to find a reason. Like it's like I entered a maze and I thought I could solve it. And the more I tried to solve it, the deeper I got wrapped up in this maze until imagine I'm in a room, right? I've bleached the room because I'm afraid of germs and I'm afraid of things in the air. And I've had the house checked, the water, the air, everything has been checked. I still bleach the floor. I sleep on a wood floor and I wear goggles and I have a fan that blows on me. And I'm sitting in there counting this was my life. Like, and I went from someone I was always performing, doing stand up, going auditioning, and then here I am locked in a room, and I don't know how any of this happened, but you can start to believe at this moment how to get out of that, because of course your mind is like, well, kill yourself. You should just. I kept having that voice in my head, like, just end it. And you're like, okay, hello, I'm not going to. But something about this actually was a turning point for me where I was like, okay, well, let's imagine I do end my life next week. Okay, so I'm going to end my life next week. So what am I so worried about right now? Like, why am I trapped in my room? Why am I letting all this fear consume me? So it had like I guess a paradoxical effect, but then I'm like, well, I want to really live. And so I got these like little breaths of like maybe sanity or wanting to live. And from those, because sometimes you just need a little something that gets you going. And from those, I started to come back. And then I went back to where I grew up. There was something about seeing something familiar. And I did the moth. This I told my true story. I was like, because I was always performing, but now I hadn't performed for a couple of years. And I was even afraid of my reflection. Like I didn't look at myself for maybe 3 years, which is crazy because I was afraid of this is nuts. I was afraid my OCD boiled down to me being afraid of my eyes, which is wild, right? So my mind, in order to escape all the chaos, is just focusing on this one thing that it can control. Which was, I knew it was nuts. I told everyone this is nuts. I'm aware that this is crazy, but this is what's happening. How do I get out of this? And there was something about finally going on stage at the Moth where I was like, hey, I'm just going to get on stage and I'm just going to tell a room full of strangers how fucking crazy I am, right? And when I did that, it was like kind of a comedy kind of truth, story, and they were laughing, and you felt like, oh well, I'm going to be okay, and there's something about being heard, right? And also not just by your family, because sometimes there's something really freeing in the anonymity of, and maybe you experience this even on TikTok. You can go on there and almost people will be in their car, like dumping their guts out. And you're like, oh, you would probably never tell your family that, but you're telling the world, right? And there's something beautiful about that. And there's something really healing. And when I saw that on TikTok, I was like, oh, this is pretty much like the Moth almost, but this didn't happen before years ago. People didn't, just open up to strangers about everything and how they're struggling. And so I think there is beauty in that, because once you do that, then you're like, okay, well, we're ready to heal together because we know that we're all sick and we know that we're all messed up in different ways. And that helped me. What I'm saying is the Moth. It's almost like, okay, well, I've got some kind of control over this. Now that I've said it, I've been heard, I'm going to be okay. And from that, this is a very long answer to your question, but this is where I started to develop those ideas of like, I'm thankful to be here every day. Like every day is a bonus day. I didn't end my life, right? I wasn't really ever going to, but if people are listening and you do have those suicidal thoughts, just know that maybe it means that a part of you is dying, right? Just like a cicada or like the lobster or whatever, you're shedding part of it. That doesn't mean end your life, but it means that like, yes, me, Ryan, who didn't have a kid before, he's dead. And maybe that was an ego death. And now there was a rebirth of this other person. And yeah, when your mind tells you that, like, hey, end your life, because I heard that a lot in my mind. And I would just say, hey, I see you, I know what you're doing, but I'm going to use this moment, right? Almost like as a mental skydive to like feel really alive. Like, hey, I'm not going to die. And you know what? I am alive right now. And I'm so lucky to be here on this planet. And then I started the lottery videos kind of I saw this painting one time, and it looked like it was abstract, right? It was all these images with little eyes on them. And I'm like, oh, that looks like everybody waiting to be born. And I just always had this idea of like, imagine that being you or anyone listening, that we're not on Earth yet, and we're talking about like, hey, I heard it's like this playground, and that how the water feels like you get to have a body, and like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to be like, like that excitement, like that when I saw my kids when they came into this world, right? or any child, and you see them play with something and how happy they are, you're like, part of me thought, oh, maybe they were talking about that for 1,000 years or 100 years before they were born, because they're just in the bathtub with a plastic bottle having the time of their life, right? It's the greatest thing. And I'm like, why can't I do that? And yeah, of course, I've had all these expectations on myself from when I was younger of like, I'm going to achieve these very lofty goals, right? And when you don't do that, it puts a lot of pressure on you and you start to turn on yourself. But then really, if I could have that much fun with a plastic water bottle in a bathtub, it's like, well, then I really made it, right? Because I don't need to, like, I don't need to accomplish all those things. I got it. I get it. I'm here to live. I'm here to enjoy this life. And so, I try to, with my videos, some of them, uh, have those reminders, or just really just things that I've thought of that have helped me in my life, or that I'm wondering. I try to share those. And it feels good. It does feel really good when people write you and they're like, "Hey, man, you know, thanks," because that resonated with me. And just the idea that every day is a bonus day, that we get to be here, even though it hurts. It's hard to always think that way, but I do try to set up little reminders for myself. Little things that I do, because it's hard to stay sane in this world. You can easily. I broke. I did. It happened in a crazy way. And I'm thankful there was a friend of mine who moved in with me. Human beings, you're close friends and people, like, there is so much love in this world. To just want to remind anyone out there listening, if you are hurting, you know, yeah, my friend moved in with me to make sure that that didn't hurt myself. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with me and with us.
that's long-winded. Yeah.
No, it's exactly where I was not expecting it to go this direction, but I love this. And it's so interesting. I was kind of looking through your videos last night, just kind of like seeing what questions I wanted to ask you. And I didn't look at the comments on any of your videos except for one. And it was like the first comment that jumped out, and I was contemplating whether or not to bring it up, but it felt very moving to me. And actually can't I only screenshotted your response, so I don't even know
Okay.
what the person's comment was in particular, but it was something about wanting to end their life.
Yeah.
And I get those comments sometimes and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I just kind of like decide not to touch it most of the time.
Okay.
But your response was, I used to use the thought of ending my life to make me feel more alive. I can leave at any point, so why not enjoy it while I can? Someday I will be gone. And I read that and I was just like, whoa, like that is just the most beautiful response. And
Well, thank you
another,
for saying that.
yeah, another message that I've been receiving lately is like, we all experience an equal amount of light and darkness in this world, but
Yeah.
we get to choose the magnitude to which we feel the light and the darkness while we're
Okay.
here. And so I believe that the individuals who experience the most darkness will also experience the most light. And you've gone
Yeah.
through some darkness, you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have too. And I
Yeah.
haven't really I've been wanting to share this, but haven't really had the right time, and this feels like a good
Yeah.
time. So if it's
Yeah.
okay
Yeah.
with you, I'm
Yes.
gonna
Do it.
share
Of
this right
course.
now.
I would
So
love it.
yeah, I lost my dad to younger onset Alzheimer's when I was 24,
Oh,
and
sorry.
it just like rocked my world in a way that I was not ready for. I had 5 years to get used to the idea of him being gone. I watched him decline, but nothing actually could have prepared me for
Yeah.
losing him. And I had this feeling of wanting to go with him, like a lot.
Yes.
And it just felt like he's the person that I want to be with the most. Like, why would I want to stay here when I could go with him? And I didn't really have any plans of acting on it, but it didn't really feel like I didn't hear anyone talking about that when it came to grief, and it
Yeah.
felt like it was wrong and I should be ashamed that I felt that way. But that's how I felt. And,
Yeah.
luckily I had very supportive family, and my boyfriend at the time, now husband, was there for me. But like, I kept that to myself for most of the time because it just felt so dark. But
Yeah.
sometimes I think if we can just share that, just voice that
Yeah.
in a safe space, it takes up so much. It has so much less power over us, you know?
Yeah. And it's hard to share it with your family, right?
It is.
Because you
Yeah,
don't want to scare them.
right. You don't want them to think that you're actually going to do something, but at the same time, you need to talk to someone about
Yeah,
it, you
because
know?
you're like, I have these thoughts and I don't know what if at the wrong moment I do something.
Yeah.
And just so you know, there's a comedian who lost her grandfather,
Mhm.
and she did that to go because he was so important to her.
Mhm.
So she did end her life, and it
Yeah.
was like kind of shocking because you're like, oh, this person has everything
Right.
going for them, and so you do. Well, I'm thankful you're here.
Thank you.
I mean,
I'm thankful you're here. I'm thankful I'm here.
yeah,
We're here
and
together
everybody
on this
listening,
day.
well, like, why rush it? We're gonna die. I reminded myself that too. It's like it's gonna happen. You
Right.
know, I'm gonna be a rush. And you don't know what the universe has waiting for you.
Hmm.
Maybe it's so dark in that moment, and I felt like, how can I ever get out of this? Like, look how crazy I am, and the whole world. I try to not let too many people know what was going on, but
Yeah.
in your mind, you're like, everybody knows. So
Right.
like, why even? But then, there's so many beautiful things out there. Even just like some days, a sunrise. I'm like, I'm so glad I'm here for this, right?
Right.
That I got to see this,
Yeah.
and also that's something I wrote about a couple of years ago. I was like, allow yourself to just sometimes experience life alone for yourself and like look at the magic of it all. I remember there was a little orange tree in my front yard, and just the process of like, wait, that tree is giving me a gift, right? And I could reach it with my hand, and it's wrapped, and it has slices for my friends, and it tastes like candy. I'm like, oh my, just to have that moment for myself was so beautiful, to appreciate it,
Yeah.
uh, and and it's so easy in our world to forget that, to not see that. And I don't want to say that it's harder when you're younger, but I do think when I was like 20s, 30s, the ego was really strong. And now I'm post kids in my 40s, and you're almost like, okay, you feel like I'm kind of through the storm a little bit. I'm sure there's other chapters of my life that are going to rock me, but at this moment, I'm not in that like competitive zone of, all the comparing that happens and all, and which is this misery, which totally happened. Of course, I would audition, there'd be 30 dudes that look just like me, like all different versions of them, You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And they're all so talented. You're like, what is happening? My brain can't even handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a big reason why I took a break from TikTok, because I was so focused on like the views and the likes, and
Yeah.
like it's being so happy for other people and their success, but also then
Yeah.
looking at myself and being like, okay, well, what I have to say must not be as valuable as what they have to say, because there
Yeah.
are all these people that are, liking and seeing them, when like, in all honesty, a lot of it is like luck in the algorithm. And I always,
Yeah.
but it's also not, because it's like, if I was meant to have that at this time, then I would,
Yeah.
and I'm not, so I don't.
And also you're on your own journey, right? It's about your growth. And so like the art, what I try to remind myself that when you're creating or when you're working on something, it's actually working on you, and these blocks that you have, or these pains, where it makes you confront yourself. Like I was trying to write a screenplay and I'm so blocked on it. And I'm like, am I afraid of success? Do I think I don't deserve success? And like what is that? Why is that stopping me? And maybe what is my shadow? What is my all that stuff? All from trying to make something that no one's ever seen. No, I've been working on this thing forever, and it's just torn me apart.
Yeah.
Now, oh, I did want to address one thing before.
Yeah.
You said when people write you about suicide, you're not sure how to answer that because it's so delicate and you want to be responsible, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to say the wrong thing. Well, on my Instagram, which I animated people's stories from around the world about different things that they're going through. And a lot of people wrote me about suicide. And when I first started Instagram, I was like, I'm not going to make this a show and tell. Like, I want this to be, I'm answering every single message that comes to me, right? And so people wrote me from around the world with all of their problems. Now, most were positive, or not that heavy, but some did write me very painful stories. And sometimes people, what I learned, you just need to be heard. They just want someone to hear them, just like I did when I did the moth. The audience hearing me. Now they didn't have to say anything to me, but Lord, it was powerful to get it off my chest and to know that another person on this earth cared to at least listen, and I would try to, of course, I'd say like as best I can, hey, well, what's your situation and all this, and give them my experience. But yeah, I did have some scary things happen on Instagram actually. Somebody called me and she's like, "Hey, you're the only good thing in my life. You don't know me, but I just took a bunch of pills and I'm gonna die in a half hour. And could you just talk to me as I die?" I was like on the road. I was in Latvia. It was 3 a.m. and I had answered a call. They can call you. And I answered it. I don't know why. And then I'm on the phone, I'm like, wait, where are you in the world? I'm trying to find like the ambulance, It's just like thinking this person. So everything is
Wow.
she didn't die, by the way. She didn't. So
That's good. Yeah, that'd be
yeah,
like
but
my
it's
worst nightmare coming to life. I'd be like, oh no, please don't
you're like,
do
there's
this.
no saving at this point. What do I do?
Yeah.
But yeah, to be there for each other in some way. TikTok's different because you can't do the voice message, and so it's
Mm,
kind of harder. So
yeah. So, in addition to kind of some of the more heavy topics that we've covered, I think there's also a lot of day-to-day stressors that kind of take people out of just enjoying the beautiful life around them. And I've seen you make a couple videos about like finances, bills, like paying for college.
yeah,
And that is something that I've really struggled with for the past year as well, is like, okay, I'm getting this message to go down this path, but like there is nothing financially that is telling me that
oh
this is a
yeah,
good idea, you know? And so,
yes.
like, how do you keep on the path that you're being guided to while also trying to manage everyday life stressors that may not be aligning with what you're being guided to do?
I know it's so confusing. It's a
Yeah.
conflicted message. It's like I want to be 5D and create all the time, but you're like, oh well, I have to eat and
Yeah.
and everything's getting more expensive, and so and then sometimes when you're locked, when your creative passion or your life and all the joy, and when that's not showing any results, you're kind of like, well, forget it, and I'll just
Mm,
go back to the matrix, and maybe I should have always just cared about money because I remember when I was driving my kid to preschool, I wasn't making that much money at the time. And then you see all the other people that were like, oh, they're in the matrix. They're doing great. They got the safe cars. They got the organic food. You're like, oh, for some reason, when you have a kid, you're like, oh, I'm definitely have to play this game now
mm,
because, and that's a hard thing to do. And so, yeah, I don't quite know. I still am trying to figure that out. Because you'd like to think, what they say, like, oh, do what excites you the most, right? And then the universe will open the doors and everything's going to work out. And you're like, but is it working out? And I don't
right.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you see people just like that are monsters being so successful with all the money. You're like, okay, I'm something I'm not, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Even my Instagram. So Instagram, I started on this journey. I came back to be creative and I was like, oh, well, let me animate some true stories, right? And it exploded. This was back when Instagram was like, maybe the main one. I don't know. But it was like a slot machine effect on my phone, just going nuts. And you're like, oh, wow, this is exciting. All this energy coming towards me. The universe is guiding me because I thought I was going to be a performer. But now here I am hearing people's stories and sharing them. And oh, this obviously will lead to money. No, it never led to any money ever. That didn't happen. And then I kept climbing more and more followers, more and more. And you're like, surely some job opportunity will present itself because the universe has guided me here. And then you're like, no, I spend money on this. I'm losing. I'm not, what am I doing? And so I did eventually pause it and stop to be like, okay, well, I gotta like take a moment and think, what am I doing? You know?
Right.
Because yes, there are your soul and your spirit feels recharged in doing what you feel connected to, but at the same time, you're like, am I hurting other aspects of my life by
Mm.
putting so much energy into this? And you're like, yeah, I listen to all the people, I listen to what they say, and I'm not seeing results. So it's hard. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. If I ever do, then I will know, but I have not had any, I got like $10 for a TikTok live. I actually got a little bit more for one of the lives. So but that's about it. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's great.
hey, there
I
you
think
go. I'm
I
on my
think
path.
people think it's like so like, oh, if you have a big following, like it's so easy, like money's just flowing in. You're like, no, that's not it at all, unless you're like pushing all this stuff. But yeah, I
I
think
think that's what you have to do is have your thing on the back
yeah,
end or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
I remember one time, and this was like I had like 250,000 followers, and I'm like, let me just do a Patreon, right? Let me just put out a Patreon. And it was like, I think two people. It was like $1, you know. I was like, okay, okay. Well,
like
I
surely
appreciate
they'll
it.
come flocking in.
I appreciate them for that. And you're like, well, thank you, you know, because that is something, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But also it feels weird never ask for money. And I'm like, is that my problem? Because I'm the one who's like, oh, sorry, I hate to, you
right,
know,
yeah,
so maybe it's my thing. I don't know. Maybe it's my
yeah,
own block. Yeah, people have written me before and they're like, hey man, like I have a chance to go to engineering school and be an engineer, but I really want to be an artist. And I was like, look, it's okay to do both if you can, right?
yeah,
It's okay to do both because when I graduated UCLA School of Theater, this is messed up because it was like every quarter we had to audition to stay in this thing. So it's high pressure, which didn't matter. So a lot of people who got caught ended up being the most famous ones. So none of it matters, right? But to us in the moment, it was really stressful. And so I made it through this program. And at the very end, one of the teachers was like, you know what you should do? You should get a job as a plumber. They're like, because then I was like, what are you telling me? Get a job as a plumber after all this, after this intense program? And he's like, yeah, because then you have this trade skill that you could always rely on to fund your other thing. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I ended up doing sound for television, which is kind of like the plumber of like television shows, because I go on a TV show, I make the money, then I go and I spend it making short films or whatever. So in order to stay alive, I do that and then, keep pursuing this thing and take like literal. I think the way to go, right, is you have your job and then you got your side things that you're doing. And it's almost like playing the slot machines, you know, something's going to hit. And I've had a few things hit in my life, right? But they did never keep hitting. But that's what I would say has been my experience. And I did, of course, try to go hardcore. I'm like, you know what? I'm living in a double decker bus. I bought this double decker bus, and I met this Australian dude who's like, man, I'll teach you how to sell bird whistles. And I was like, sweet, dude. So I sold these bird whistles on Venice Boardwalk in Los Angeles, right? This is after I got sober. I'm like, I don't want any stress. I just want to recharge, I'm gonna work on my craft. And lived in a bus and sold bird whistles on Venice Boardwalk. And my girlfriend at the time was like, you don't, we're not telling anyone about this. We're not mentioning the bird whistles at these anybody. I was like, I make enough for lunch and dinner. I'm out in the sun, meeting people. I feel alive. Yeah, so
I love that so
but
much. That's
eventually,
awesome.
eventually you're like, I really am broke and
Right, right, right. Yeah.
and then when I got a job again on a TV show, I was like, oh, thank God, I really need this money. Like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of people and maybe this is my own fear just when I was, working a traditional 9 to 5 and I was really unhappy was just like I don't want to wake up when I'm 60 and be like, whoa,
Yeah,
what have I even done with my life? You know?
definitely. Yeah.
It's so, and I'm not saying that you can't work a traditional job and also lead a very fulfilling life because I think you absolutely can, but it's a balance. You can't, I mean, these people that pour everything into their career, I'm just like,
Yeah.
if I were them, I'd wake up and be like, what did I even just do with my life, you know?
Yeah. And then the fear could keep you there. And it does seem even harder nowadays than when I grew up because I'm 46 and I'm watching all these videos on TikTok of, there's a whole generation that are like moving in their car and they make it look awesome. But then part of me is like, well, that's cool, but also I really wish you didn't have to live in your car,
Yeah.
that the world was in a different place because I had, bottom of the barrel jobs after university, but I still had an apartment, right? That amount of money, even though I was doing multiple jobs, you could still like have a roommate, not that that's like the best solution, but I just part of me thinks that God has become so much more difficult.
Mhm.
And so if I was growing up now, I'd be tempted to be like, you know what? I'm gonna work a little bit. I'm gonna go to Asia or India somewhere and like then pursue my craft or do whatever. I'd be tempted to get out entirely,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I do think about because I have two daughters and I'm like, what are they gonna do? I'm like, I either need to really hit it big, right? So they don't gotta worry. But then everyone's like, you can't do that. They're gonna raise monsters. But of course, I'm their dad. I'm like, whatever. You just hang out. Uh,
I was curious, do your kids how old are your kids if you don't mind me asking?
12 and 9.
Okay, do they know that you're like a big deal kind of on TikTok? Do they know that?
That what's really cute? Okay, this is a cool moment for me because growing up, I don't know if you ever did this, but like I was in theater and I was always trying to be a comedian. So I'd have these, you do the fake Oscar speech, right? In your mind, you're doing your fake Oscar speech, and yeah, I'm doing my fake Letterman couch, thing. And then I'm hoping that like, oh, I hope at some point in my life, like, what if I'm in a really awesome project and my kids come to set or they see it or I'm in a Broadway play and they see me and then I hope that they're proud of me, that they're proud of their dad, right? So just like you have these fantasies when you're younger, And then I'm in the car and I was waiting for their school to open up and they're in the car with me and I checked my TikTok really quick and they're like, Dad, what's that? And I was like, oh, somebody has duetted my thing. And they're like, Dad, their eyes lit up, right? They're like, oh my God, Dad, somebody duetted you. Show it to us. And then I was like trying to figure it out and I showed them and I could tell in that moment that they were so proud. Even though it's in this whole different format, and I'm 46, I don't really think it too much they're very excited, So I did feel that a little bit that dream that I had when I was younger in high school, whatever. Like in that moment, I saw that my kids were proud of me, and they
Yeah.
used to be in my videos on YouTube and stuff because I did that Venn diagram after I had like my mental breakdown. I was like, okay, how do I come back to the world as a performer? What do I do? And there was a three circles. You're like, what do you want? What are you good at? And what does the world need? And
Mm.
so I did this like I was going to be like a comedy show with my kids about raising awareness for endangered animals or for animals. And so for a while when they were little, we used to make videos together and they were really into it. And then of course they started charging me. They're like, Dad, this is kind of child labor, right? So if I'm working for you, you need to give me some Robux, which is that they play this game called Roblox. And so I was always buying them Robux to
Oh
be in
my
my
God.
bits.
That
And
is so
then
funny.
yeah, so we had fun for a while, but then eventually it's hard to get your kids to always like, hey guys, I got a new video idea. They're like, no, we're good. We're
Yeah.
good.
Like we're just gonna
Okay.
go play.
Yeah. And it's also true, like with social media, you have to have something that you can be consistent with, right?
Yeah.
So putting together a short film with your family, it's like that's gonna happen once a month, maybe once every 2 weeks. But like a daily thing, I was like, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So each format kind of has a different thing that you create for it. You learn.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think that's so cool.
It was fun.
Especially
I
like
loved it.
something as like simple as a duet, because like we know that it's like so easy
Yeah.
to just click a button and
Yeah.
like
They were
it's
freaking
really
out.
not a big deal of
Yeah.
all the
They were
things.
they were so excited because it was like a younger person dancing with me and so they were just like yeah, it
That
was
is pretty
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
That shows that you're cool.
I was like, "Oh, I did it."
Yeah. I mean, I personally am always trying to infuse more fun into my life. Is that something that you actively think about? Do you seek out fun? Is it just like
Yeah.
naturally in your life? How do you go about that?
Okay, well, I'll have like different moments, right, in my life where, and a lot of it kind of happens when you're not in your familiar pattern. So, and I feel blessed that I have this job where I get to travel. And so, like, I woke up, I was in the Netherlands one day, and sometimes your mind will start to attack you, and you're like, no, what can I do for a while? It's like, how can I surprise someone else? How can I make this, it is not about me. What can I do for the world? How do I appreciate it? And I'm walking around and it was some like the tulips are so popular, in the Netherlands. And so I saw them when I got off the tram or subway. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to buy these tulips and I'm going to go give them to people that I notice that they have that spark or whatever, just something so that they feel appreciated. And now maybe they didn't, but for me, I felt extra alive in this moment and maybe it's novel because I'm in a new place and I just did this again in Montreal, a version of it. I bought flowers and I thought, I will exchange this flower to you for a happy memory, to remind us because we're so overwhelmed with so much bad news and so much everything's toxic, everything is. And so it's like, hey, tell me your happiest memory and you can have this flower for free. And I was in old Montreal and I just recently did that. And it was just kind of it ends up being a beautiful moment. I was going to film it originally, and then I was like, well, that might be weird. I don't want to be like too exploitative of this moment. I just kind of want to feel this connection and to be alive. And I was waiting in line this goes back for French fries in The Hague, Netherlands. And the woman who was selling the French fries spoke 7 different languages because I'm like 8 back in the line, and each person she's like, oh, what, French? Oh, Czech? Oh, German? And each person she hits it, right? So when I got up there, I was like, I gotta tell you, my mind is blown, right? I just heard you speak 7 languages. And she said, thank you so much. Also, I don't look at myself as just like, someone who works at a French fry stand, but I try to give people something special, like a little bit of love with how I present them or how I interact. And I was like, yes, we were both on that same wavelength at that moment. Like, no matter what you do, if you turn it into like an act of service, in a way you can find more joy in it. Like even my job, like I used to look down on myself for my job because I didn't make it as this big, whatever I had in my mind, artist, comedian. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this job this was like my side gig. I'm like, wait, how about let me reverse engineer my mind on my job because, well, I get to travel the world and I get to work with my friends. And why am I not seeing this, So it's weird how we know our own madness, right? And we can unravel our own madness and help us enjoy life. And one way I do that is I'll run little experiments for myself, like that day in the Netherlands or in old Montreal. Now, do I do that in my normal life? Sometimes, but for some reason, when you're traveling, it just feels easier because you're like, whatever, I'm a blank slate. I'm out of here. If like something goes terrible, it'll all be good. Um, yeah, and so yes, I do try to have that. I remember that. Didn't Matthew McConaughey have like a cool monologue about joy? He's like, not happiness, choice. I feel like one of my friends sent me that, and I was like, yes, McConaughey just always killing it. Just
I feel like he could say anything though, with
yeah,
his voice.
yeah,
You're like, yes, absolutely. That
yeah,
makes
whatever.
sense.
Yeah, we're all on his shoes. How about
Yeah.
you with joy in your life? Are you
Um,
searching for?
yeah, I think I love your idea of kind of turning it into service, because I do think that that is something that brings me a lot of joy whenever I can help someone else. For me, especially right now, I'm just trying to come back to the little moments because I think especially with TikTok, with being a content creator, you can get so sucked into this life
Yeah,
that's not actually around you. It's like it's there, but it's not
yeah,
there, you know?
yeah.
And
It's a
I
very strange experience.
yeah, and so I try to like I have such a beautiful marriage. I've made such great friends this year. I was able to move to this place that I've been wanting to move to for so long. And
Yes.
I mean, I was just leaving the grocery store yesterday and I smiled at this guy, and actually he didn't smile back, but for some reason
Yeah,
it like triggered something in my brain, and I was like, whoa, I did it. I live in this place that I've wanted to for so
yeah.
long, and
Big quantum
I'm
jumps.
just coming out of the grocery store like a normal person who lives here. And now I'm gonna go to my car and put my groceries and drive to my
Yeah,
house that I have here.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what? And so I
yeah,
think like for me, honing in on those little details of things that I wanted for so long, and as
yeah,
soon as I got them, I forgot about them. You know what I mean? Like, I
yeah,
feel like we want something for so long and then we get it and we're like, cool, what else do I want? You know?
yeah. It's hard that that's our condition.
Yeah.
But you're at the point where you're like, it's like a reminder that, oh, we came here to play, right?
Yeah.
Because even most things, whenever I get bogged down on an idea that I'm doing, I'm like, hey, step back and just play and trust
Yeah.
that the sculpture will reveal itself as you just start going. It will begin to form. And that's the exciting part about creating or any adventure is like as soon as you jump and you start going, it starts to take some shape. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the magic. I guess I love to, we're born into a mystery, right? Um, and so it's exciting to wonder and have all these things. And yes, so much of our life stops us from that, mainly ourselves. I don't know if it's because of our programming. So I do try to do little things in my day where I'm like, hey, I'm going to wake up early. This is a big thing for me in getting sober. I'm all about that. Having my morning alone and being present. Maybe I see the sunrise, I have my coffee, and I'm like, oh, okay. If the rest of my day is just chaos and a nightmare, well, at least I had that. I had the morning. And so, well, that's good. So I try to do things like that and really make an active choice in your mind to see the beauty in the world and to see the beauty in each other and to not be afraid to tell someone, hey, uh, thank you. I see you and I appreciate this. Like I felt that, because people have said it to me and they do on TikTok and on Instagram. And it really is a beautiful feeling to feel like we're here together and we're all supporting each other. And I do think we are in a transition. I do think if you see people dumping their guts out online, you're like, God, that never happened, right? And we're like, where do we go from here? And if we're there for each other, of course on TikTok, there's always like, oh, it's the end of the world. There's gonna be a solar flare, and we're all gonna kill each other. And you're like, or it's like we're all camping together, if we're all thinking, hey, you could, we got a slumber party here. We could grow, I got some land. We could grow a little bit of food, right? There's tons of farms out there. I drive past them all the time. We could eat that. We don't all have to just murder each other.
Yeah.
Why are we going there? So I try to, in little ways, in each day, we can spread love and remind each other that, hey, maybe we were together before we came to this planet. And maybe we're like, hey, I can't wait. Man, I'm going to meet you when I'm 46 and you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't, we're going to wait that long. I mean, who knows? Right. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I imagine like, do we have like points and you're walking through a hallway and there's all these different avatars and they're like, okay, you have enough to be this Ryan guy who's born in San Diego. And you're like, oh, sweet. I get to be that. Oh, awesome. And then maybe that's a way to get excited about yourself that like you wanted to be here. You wanted to have this life. Sometimes I think with my kids, the psychic told us that, we were going to have our second kid was going to be a boy, but Loretta, my little one, was best friends with my older one, Izzy. And so she had to come in and she like snuck in. And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense because they are best friends. Like all their life, I'm always like, you guys, you girl ladies, stop getting it's time for bed. Like they won't stop. So, and that's such a good feeling to see it because and you get to see that when you have kids especially that your spirit comes in and it's it is their own spirit and as a parent I can just be there to guide and love them and do the best I can but they are their own it's and of course when they first come in they're seeing things that aren't there you're like oh there's another world here that I'm not that I can't see that they definitely do. And I
Yeah.
imagine it's their friends from wherever we come from in pre-life that are like, hey, look at you, or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I was around a baby recently, and babies have always kind of not scared me, but I don't necessarily want to
Yeah,
hold them because I'm like they're so
yeah,
fragile, you know. And I was holding her and I kind of like saw her looking around the room and I just like
yeah,
instead of just seeing her as a baby, I saw her as like a soul that just got here, you
yeah,
know? And that was the first time I've ever actually looked at a human being and thought that, and it
yeah,
was just such a cool experience. I'm like, wow, you're like a whole soul. You're not just a baby, you're
yeah,
like a whole freaking soul in there that's like
yes,
experiencing this world for the first time through these specific eyes, you know?
yeah.
That's crazy.
Also, I remember when I had a baby too, and I looked around. I'm like, everybody here was a baby. You're a baby. So if you have any enemies in your life, sometimes it helps to be like, that was a baby, and like somehow, right? And like every single person was once a baby, right? So who are we kidding, right? We're all just babies here on this planet. Let's just,
That's so real. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna hold on to that
yeah,
one. They were a
yeah,
baby.
yeah. And like just somebody loved them, somebody took care of them. I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully they have love. Not everybody.
yeah, yeah. Well, I have a few last little questions for you, but is there
Okay.
anything that we haven't already covered that you wanted to chat about?
No, there was something that came up in my mind, but I forgot it. But maybe it'll come back.
Okay, yeah,
I don't
just
know.
stop me in the middle if you think of it or
Okay.
at the end, we're happy to keep chatting.
Yeah.
Okay. So my first question is if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Oh, gosh, it's hard because I know my younger self. I felt invincible when I was younger, you know? I had a dad who would just, I had the best dad who would just fill me with all these like almost mythological stories of like who I was gonna be, you know? And I believed him. So I didn't, gosh, that would be hard because when I was younger, I didn't expect that all the things that happened would happen.
Mhm.
So I guess I would say to try to keep your, I mean, I guess I would say there's going to be rough times ahead, but just, hold on. It's not quite the way that my dad made it seem like it's going to go. My dad made it seem like it was like I don't even know how to say what but yeah, I guess just hold on because you never know what the universe has waiting for you. Because it didn't go the way that the young me envisioned. Like if young me saw who I was now, I think they might be like, oh, okay, what wait, this oh, and then I'd be like, hey, what's up? Hey, what? Yeah, everything's okay. Yeah, definitely have different versions of my mind of what I was gonna be when I was
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure younger you would be very impressed with current you because
oh,
a lot of people are. I'm sure that they would be
well,
impressed.
I appreciate that. I was definitely
Um,
maybe delusional a little bit.
that's okay. That's how
Yeah,
Delulu, right? That's what everybody says. So,
I think it worked. Yeah, you kind of have to be, right?
yeah, have those big dreams.
Oh, what if I say dream smaller or to my younger self? Hey, dream a little smaller. It'll hurt less. Aim low. No. No.
Just like take it down a notch.
Yeah, your dad's on some other trip, right? Okay. Like I was not even good at sports, but my parents just had me so high that I was like, my
Yeah.
dad was one of those guys who's like, he's running on the sidelines with you, like giving directions, and he's in the end zone before you get there. So it's just, that
I
was it.
love
It was a
that.
good time.
Yeah. Yeah. In your darkest hour, what keeps you going?
Darkest hour. It does change. At first, I had such a strong dream inside of me, like this drive to create, almost a like, where you feel like if you came into this world and there was one piece that was put inside of you, right? Like, hey, you're going to go to this world, and there's a lot of things that are going to happen to you, but here's this one thing that you specifically have to do, right? So inside me, since I was little, has been this burning drive, right? And I didn't quite know what it was as I started to create and play in acting and art and basically creating. Then I was like, oh, this is it, right? Because I can be obsessive. Um, you know, I used to like to perform all the time, and I would do all kinds of elaborate performances. Like even I had these huge parties underneath the bridge in Los Angeles called Rock Paper Scissors Rumbles, and I hosted them. So I did so many things, just like pushing. So that would be the thing that kept me going. is I just have this drive inside me. And did I ever expect to have suicidal thoughts? No, never. So in those moments, I don't want to say when you have kids, it's weird. Sometimes you're like, well, I could never do that to them. That would be so messed up. So it changes, right? Especially I think sometimes when like your version of your dream didn't happen. So part of you is like, okay, well, that's not there for me anymore, which is, the mind attacking you, telling you, oh, you blew it. It's gone now. You can't listen to that monster in there, but it's always in there.
Yeah.
And so no matter what, my kids,
Yeah, absolutely. What is one thing that you've done for yourself recently that you are grateful to yourself for?
oh, I would say because I do love to perform and to allow like that's my thing, right? I love to be creative. And so for me, it's like a special treat almost to allow myself the time because, in our lives, kids, jobs, all the things you got to do. It's like, hey, I'm going to give myself this moment to do this thing and to really push for it. And so I will say we talked about it. What was nice for me was it was my day off in multiple locations around the world, and I'm like, I'm going to use this moment, because I'm here alone on this wherever I am in the world, and that day where I was like, hey, I'm going to make something special today, and I'm just going to believe it that it's going to be great, and I'm going to go to this place. And so for me, that moment of the lottery video there, where I was on my own cliff in Malta, even the cops or the harbor patrol came and they came by and they waved at me. I was like, gosh, if I was in USA, I feel like I would get arrested. Like, obviously, I'm on somebody else's property. I shouldn't be on the side of the cliff dancing. But in Malta, they're like, what's up? And so that was a beautiful day to when you allow yourself, right, on your day off, hey, I'm going to go do something, and I'm going to believe that whatever it is, maybe no one will care about it, but it's going to be special to me because I tried to make it like a ceremony. I've been trying to do these things where it's like giving it more power, almost like that psycho magic idea. I don't know if you've heard about that, where like you put intentional thought with like a ritual. And so I'm trying everything these days. I'm like, what, you give it to me. I'm 46. What do you got? I'll put it in. Let me try it. So I think allowing myself to, I'd hop on TikTok and be open to experimenting with different creative ways to go because it's easy to just stay to one thing, like, oh, I animate things and that's what it is because I don't have much time. And then you're like, but I don't feel really alive doing it. So when do I feel really alive? And then I was like, oh, well, it's when I'm performing or creating or moving or dancing. And so that's been really fun, you know. From that, I'm like dancing around, roller skating as the sun, and I'm like, God, I just kind of want to be the sun. I don't even want to be Brian anymore. I'll be that dude.
Yeah.
So it's fun when you allow yourself, right? Allow yourself to to pursue what makes you feel the most alive.
Mm. Yeah.
So, because there's always things in your life stopping you. There's always a reason not to do it, right? There's always other things you got to do in the matrix.
Yeah.
So part of your mind has to be like, no, this is a gift to me, right? Because I'm here and I'm the one who dies, and I don't want to die feeling like I didn't really feel up to my, of course, everyone wants to live up to their ultimate potential, but who knows what that is really,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's scary. It's scary when I say that because you're like, I'm not there. It's like, so I don't want to say those words even because my mind already is like, oh, where are you on the scale? I'm like, stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And then lastly, what is one piece of advice or words of encouragement that you would give to someone who's just starting out on their spiritual journey?
oh, I'm going to say to play, right? Don't forget to play. That we came here for that. Imagine Earth is just this playground of different experiences that you get to have, right? I believe that we came here to feel, because we are in this feeling suit. So yeah, it hurts, right? But even when it hurts, you can turn that into something positive. Even this is going to sound dumb, but like I did this creepy character monologue on social media because social media can play mind games with the creators. And so I was like, oh, instead of like sitting with this gross feeling that I have, how do I turn this into something, you know? And so just know that everything that comes to your life, whether it's dark or light, sometimes if you sit with it, your mind, you'll get an idea of like, oh, what could I do with this? Because of course, not everything's going to be amazing. And even if you tell a story, like imagine this, if you tell someone like, oh my God, and then I made all this money, and then I got a yacht, and then we just partied on the yacht. After a while, your people are checking out. They're like, dude, screw you, stop. They're like, no, man, I split my head open, right? I had to relearn, and then I was drunk. You're like, so that when bad things are happening, at the very least, it's a great story, right? Because you got through it. And when you tell me how you got through it, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I could do it too. So I would say that just know, and I feel fortunate. This is strange in my life, right? I got to meet Dr. Timothy Leary. How random is that? Now, maybe you don't know who he was, but he was kind of like the godfather of acid and all that from way, way back when. And I remember I met him, of all things. My dad was an insurance guy, and he insured like uh, kind of party people of Los Angeles, all kinds of weird. Anyways, I'm at this large party, and I'm sitting next to Dr. Timothy Leary, and I think I was like 17 or 18 in the moment. And he's like, everything is an experience that you can grow from. He's like, prison could be a good experience because you had that experience. Everything is an experience. And I'm like, wow, that's at that moment I didn't think about it, right? At the moment, I was like, oh, Oliver Stone was at this party, and my dad's like, let me try to introduce you. And I'm like, what? How am I at a party with that guy? This is crazy, you know? But then later on in my life, I was like, oh, that's so interesting that I got to meet Dr. Timothy Leary, and he told me everything is a good experience that you can grow from.
Love
I mean,
that.
of course, even when we die, what happens, does it all, we won't know until we do, but does it all evolve our soul, every piece of it? You know, and sometimes that's when really awful things happen. You just have to believe that, because certainly things come out of nowhere for no reason at all.
Yeah.
It's just, you can look at the world as it's pure chaos and we make sense of it. I mean, I'm still not totally sure on all that. I go back and forth, right? But I do like the Einstein that I'm going to misquote him when someone said, you can see everything, the world in two ways. Everything's a miracle or it isn't. And so I try to remind myself to see if you can see everything as a miracle, right? Even if you're delusional, well, boy, you're happier, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I would think so, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love that so much. Did you happen to think of what popped in, what you were thinking
No,
of?
I think I ramble so much. It'll probably
Okay.
come up to me like
Okay.
later as I'm walking. I'm like, oh my God.
Shoot me an
But
email if we
unless,
can chat.
yeah. Oh, I will say this too. So
Yeah.
as a creative person, I have, lots of ideas come into my mind, and sometimes I don't write them down because there's too many. But I like to think that the magic ones, right, revisit you.
Yeah.
So I like to think that if it's meant for you, I do think that like there's this ether or something of, and we are being sent messages. And sometimes I think I'm being sent a message maybe with a lot of other people. And then if I don't act on it, it'll, in the book by Rick Rubin, he says that it'll just go to another artist, another creator, or, um, but we're in trying to be efficient with how many things we created. If you keep getting sent the same message, maybe you got to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, this has been so incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your light, your wisdom with me. If
Oh, yeah.
anyone is looking for a pick me up today, go visit Ryan's account. It's
And thank
full
you.
of play and laughter and lightheartedness. So just can't thank you
And
enough
thanks.
for being here.
Oh yeah, thanks for sharing your story about your father.
Yeah, thank you for sharing with me too. It took a beautiful turn that I wasn't expecting, but I loved it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening.
That wraps things up for this episode of Guided Souls. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ryan as much as I did. Make sure to go follow him on TikTok and Instagram at Endangerhood. And until next week, keep going. You're doing amazing, and I love you.